Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every moment of your life would be watched. You don't have a bedroom. You don't have a bathroom. You don't have a phone protected by a password. There are no doors to close, no quiet place to think, no private conversation. Everything you do happens in front of everyone else. It sounds unimaginable today, yet for most of human history, life looked surprisingly different from the world we know. Around 100,000 years ago, our ancestors lived in small groups of hunter-gatherers. They often stayed in caves, rock shelters, or temporary camps built from branches, animal hides, and natural materials. Survival depended on cooperation. Food was gathered together, dangers were faced together, and nights were spent close to one another for warmth and protection. Being close wasn't just convenient, it was often the safest way to survive. But that doesn't mean early humans had no sense of personal space. Anthropologists believe people across many societies have always sought moments of privacy when possible, whether for rest, caring for family members, resolving conflicts, practicing rituals, or sharing personal conversations. The difference was that these moments usually depended on nature and circumstance, not on permanent walls or locked doors. In other words, privacy wasn't a room, it was an opportunity. As humans slowly changed from wandering hunter-gatherers to building permanent settlements, something remarkable happened. People no longer lived in places they would abandon after a few weeks or months. They began creating homes. And once humans started building homes, they also started creating boundaries, not just boundaries around villages, but boundaries around families, and eventually around individuals. Without realizing it, humanity had taken the first step toward one of civilization's greatest inventions. Not fire, not the wheel, but the simple idea that sometimes a person deserves a space of their own. And that idea would quietly transform architecture, families, laws, culture, and eventually even the digital world we live in today.
For thousands of years, humans lived as travelers. When food became scarce, they moved. When seasons changed, they moved again. Their homes were never meant to last forever. But around 12,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. In different parts of the world, some communities began growing crops and domesticating animals. Instead of constantly following food, they started living in one place for much longer. This period, often called the Neolithic Revolution, changed human history forever. Villages began to appear. Simple huts slowly became permanent homes, and for the first time, people weren't just building shelters from the weather, they were creating places that belonged to them. At first, these homes were still very simple. Many families shared a single room. People cooked, worked, ate, and slept in the same space. There were no separate bedrooms, no private offices, no quiet reading corners. Life was still largely shared. But something had changed. The walls of a home created a new boundary. They separated our family from everyone else. For the first time, people had a space where strangers couldn't simply walk in whenever they wanted. That small change had enormous consequences. Families began storing food inside their homes. They protected valuable tools, seeds, and personal belongings. As people owned more possessions, they also became more concerned about protecting them. The idea of mine became stronger. And wherever ownership grows, privacy often follows. Over generations, houses became larger and more carefully designed. Rooms slowly developed different purposes. Some spaces were for cooking, others for sleeping. Some were meant for guests, others were reserved only for family members. These weren't just architectural improvements, they reflected a new way of thinking. People were beginning to understand that not every part of life needed to happen in front of everyone. A home was no longer just a place to survive, it was becoming a place where people could choose when to be together and when to be alone. Humanity had crossed an invisible line. Privacy was no longer just an accidental moment found in nature. For the first time, it was starting to be built into everyday life. But one invention would take this idea even further, a simple object that almost every one of us uses every day: the door.
Imagine walking into your home, closing the door behind you, and instantly feeling that the outside world has been left behind. Today, it feels completely normal, but for most of human history, that simple action carried a powerful new meaning. As villages grew into towns and towns became cities, life became more crowded than ever before. People no longer knew every person around them. They traded with strangers, welcomed travelers, and lived alongside growing communities. Trust was no longer automatic. It had to be protected. And that's when one of humanity's simplest inventions became one of its most important: the door. Doors had existed in ancient civilizations for thousands of years, but they gradually became much more than a way to keep out wind, rain, or wild animals. They became a way to control access. For the first time, people could decide who entered their personal space and who stayed outside. Soon, another invention strengthened that idea even further: locks. Ancient wooden locks appeared in civilizations such as Egypt and later became more sophisticated in Greece, Rome, China, and many other parts of the world. They didn't just protect valuable possessions, they protected something far more personal: the feeling that a home belonged to the people inside it. As cities expanded, privacy began influencing everyday life in unexpected ways. Homes slowly evolved into include separate bedrooms. Letters were sealed before being delivered. Personal diaries became places where thoughts could be written without fear of being overheard. Even simple social customs began to change: knocking before entering a room, waiting for permission to come inside, respecting someone's personal belongings. These behaviors may seem ordinary today, but they represent an extraordinary shift in human history. Privacy was no longer only about protecting property, it was becoming part of respect, trust, and human dignity. The ability to choose what to share and what to keep to yourself became an essential part of daily life. Yet, just as humanity became better at protecting privacy in the physical world, a new invention quietly began connecting the entire planet. It would create opportunities unlike anything before, but it would also introduce a challenge our ancestors could never have imagined: the Internet. And with it, the meaning of privacy would change once again.
For thousands of years, privacy was something you could see: a wall, a door, a lock, a curtain pulled across a window. These simple inventions gave people control over their personal space and helped shape the modern world. But during the last decades, something extraordinary happened. Human life began moving into a place with no walls at all: the digital world. Today, billions of conversations happen through smartphones instead of face-to-face. Family photos are stored in cloud services instead of photo albums. Money moves digitally. Medical records exist in databases. Even our daily routines, where we go, what we buy, what we watch, and what we search for, can leave digital traces. For the first time in history, privacy is no longer just about locking a door, it's also about protecting information. This has led to new inventions that our ancestors could never have imagined: passwords, two-factor authentication, encrypted messaging, biometric security using fingerprints and facial recognition. These tools are the modern descendants of the first wooden locks built thousands of years ago. The technology has changed, but the purpose remains surprisingly similar: to give people control over what belongs to them. Yet, the digital age has also introduced a new challenge. Every day, we balance convenience with privacy. We share photos with friends. We allow apps to access our location. We ask AI assistants questions. We connect smart devices to our homes. Each choice offers incredible benefits, but it also reminds us that privacy has never been a fixed idea. It has always evolved alongside human civilization. Perhaps that's the most fascinating part of this story. Privacy wasn't invented in a single moment. It wasn't created by one person or one civilization. It slowly grew as humans built homes, formed communities, developed laws, created technology, and learned to respect one another's personal space. The story of privacy is really the story of trust. Trust in our families, trust in our neighbors, trust in our communities, and today, trust in the digital systems that connect billions of people around the world. So, the next time you close your bedroom door, lock your phone, or choose not to share something online, remember that you're taking part in a journey that began thousands of years ago, a journey that transformed simple shelters into homes, homes into societies, and societies into the connected world we know today.
Because the greatest inventions aren't always the ones we can hold in our hands. Sometimes they're the invisible ideas that quietly change the way humanity lives forever. If you enjoyed discovering the hidden stories behind everyday life, subscribe for more documentaries exploring the inventions, ideas, and moments that quietly shaped human civilization. Because history isn't just about kings and battles. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with a simple human idea.